Okay, in terms of the agenda, so we're going to quickly, a few of us are just going to talk through different sections. What we've tried to do, we're not going to spend hours going through every bit of the guidance. So what we've done is just picked out certain bits of it that we think are really important and that everyone needs to be aware of. As always, we'd recommend that obviously you go away and, if you haven't already, go through the guidance fully, and any supporting guidance from the government as well. It is really important that you do spend the time to go through those. So we'll work through them, and then at the end we'll take a question and answer session, and any questions you might have that we've not answered throughout the call. Okay. So to start with, just thought it'd be worth raising this, that everyone, all cricket clubs, all of us on this call have a duty of care for our cricket members, our players at the ground, and also volunteers and administrators of the club. So it is really crucial that you put in place the relevant safety measures and precautions around the club in line with the guidance and in line with government guidance. As I said, make sure you go through all of the relevant guidance. We're going to provide all the links to them later in the slides, so when we send them out, you'll have all the links. But the key thing, I guess, to point out is that no matter what the guidance says, what all the things we put on must be compliant with safe hands. So obviously safe hands is the policy for safeguarding in cricket. So when we talk about ratios of training and things, everything should have that in mind and making sure we're compliant at all times. Okay, any questions on that first bit before I hand over to James just to go through some of the risk assessment? Have we had anything in the chat? No. Okay, I'm going to hand over to James then.
Thanks, Richard. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's okay. Just in terms of risk assessment then, so this is something the club has to do, making sure it's complete and compliant with the full ECB code risk assessment. You can use last year's previous one to help inform it, but it does need updating with all the information for this year as well. In terms of the actual risk assessment itself, I think a few clubs have struggled to actually access the editable template. It is on the slides here, so when we do send the slides out, you can access them there. And also as well, they're on our website as well. So if you go to our website under the COVID-19, is there for you to access as well. And also as well, to make sure that you complete the ECB preparation checklist. Again, it's the club's responsibility to make sure with a duty of care for everyone that this is done. I think everyone had to do it last year, but just please make sure that you update it. Again, that's there for you to access via these slides. And again, it's on our website.
Can I just add in, James, before you move on? Just around the importance of this, I think there was a few clubs last year where local authorities dropped in at the ground or the police dropped in at certain cricket grounds, and this is the the document they'll want to see and make sure the club have got this in place. So it really is crucial to ensuring we can continue to play cricket throughout the summer. So please do take the time to go through it and make sure you're up to date with it.
Thanks, Richard. Test and trace, again, like last year, it's a requirement that your club records all participants and visitors through the NHS test and trace. These records of customers need to be kept for 21 days. And if there is a party of following the rule of 6, then at least one of the members from every party, their details need to be taken as well. Easiest and best way to record contact details is via the club's NHS QR code. If you go via the links and on the information, the guidance that the ECB sent out, it can show you how to set up a QR code if you haven't done that already. And remember as well, if someone does refuse to give details via QR code or you taking their details down, you can ask them to leave the premises as well.
James, I'll just pick that question up. So question is, do we have to record, track and trace and do the QR code, or okay to refer everyone to the QR code? So what we'd recommend is that you set up the NHS test and trace QR code system, so you can register to do that and get your own QR code for your venue. So we'd recommend that, and ideally signpost everyone to that. Now, if someone attends and they haven't got a device or they can't access the QR code, then you would need to take their details, but ideally just get everyone to use the QR code. And obviously then it's all managed through the NHS, so all the testing and tracing, if there was an outbreak or if anyone was tested positive with COVID, then that would all be dealt with through the NHS test and trace. Sorry, I'm just having a look. Sorry, Hadders, do you want to just unmute yourself and just give me a bit more on that one? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so just quickly, you've got a junior match on all juniors. Presumably, we shouldn't ask a junior to scan a QR code.
No, so I don't think there's an issue potentially, but you shouldn't really be getting them to share the details. So I think as long as you as a club have got a record of who's played in that game, so anyone under 18, you should have their records. I think that's acceptable. So it's just making sure you as a club, and I guess if you're playing an opposition team, making sure they're aware of that, and that if there was an outbreak, they've got the relevant contact details to go through with that.
So, for example, a photograph of the team card for the day.
Yeah,
gives you that traceability, and you just pass it to the other club, and they can provide the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, and the majority of games, well, all games in the county league and Premier League will be on Play Cricket anyway, so you should have all the team details on there.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions in there that we need to pick up now, James? Or
I think it's just making sure it's aware it's still a legal requirement as well, isn't it, to make sure that this is done.
Yeah. I think the QR code should make it really straightforward. And obviously it's not just about the players as well, it's spectators. Obviously we can't do that until the 12th, which we'll talk about in a moment, but it's it's spectators and people visiting the site. Just get them to scan the QR code. I think everyone's pretty used to it by now as well, and it's pretty much everywhere you go you're having to do it. So work as hard as you can really to get them doing that. Okay, any other questions, James? Anything else on test and trace? No. Okay, we'll move on, and if you do have any more questions, then put them in the chat and we can pick them up a bit later on. I'm just going to hand over to Charlie just to talk through some of the match play guidance.
Thanks, Richard. Evening, everyone. Yeah, thanks, Rich. As mentioned at the start, this isn't an exhaustive list. The full guidance and the full match play guidance is in the ECB document that was released. Just a few key points. Mainly, pretty much exactly the same as last year in terms of match play. Players to arrive ready to play. Bring your own food and drink. Follow government guidance on travel and transport. So I think at the minute there's no car sharing. Complete a self-assessment before you come. So don't come to the game if you're showing any symptoms of COVID. During the match, no sweat and saliva on the ball, social distancing during play, team talks, celebrations are a no, and drinks breaks. You've got to use your own drinks. No team drinks provided by the club. Hygiene breaks every 6 overs. Minimal contact with the ball straight back to the bowler between balls. Try not to share equipment where possible, and if you do have to share equipment, then it needs to be cleaned in between uses. And non-striking batsmen must run on the opposite side to the batter who's striking, so socially distanced from the bowler, the umpire, and the other batter. So just something on this. One thing that has changed is the batting lines on the pitch were in place last year. They're not a requirement this year. It was, it's viewed that it's quite difficult to manage and a lot of extra work in terms of ground staff and hassle in terms of getting that going. So one thing that you just remember is the non-striking batter just needs to be distant from the umpire, the bowler, and his other batter that he's batting with. So there's not a requirement for batting lines, but the batters do need to be socially distanced from one another. And then after match play, participants need to exit the facility, you know, quite promptly after the game's done. It's, you know, there's not to be any too long social contact afterwards. And if there is, it should be within groups of 6. You know, it's just limit your time congregating at the ground after the game. But that's about it from match play, really. A lot of it's very similar to last year. And as I say, that's not the entire list of stuff. That's just the key things, really. Next slide, Rich. Signage, again, this is quite an important one. We thought we'd raise in order to make things, you know, run properly and smoothly at the club. We'd recommend that you go quite heavy on signage, make things quite clear and easy for people. You know, once they arrive at the venue, what is required of them from a COVID point of view. So it might be, you know, you've got your test and trace posters everywhere for your NHS COVID stuff. They should be all around the ground, available, easily accessible, easily to point out. Rule of 6 and social distancing reinforcement, things like that, to remind people that you've got to stay within those government guidelines. You might want to print out your risk assessment and have that on display somewhere on the pavilion, for example. Home and away team, it's worthwhile pointing out where these spaces on the ground will be. Obviously, Tom will come on to this next, but there won't be any changing rooms, so they'll also have to have an outside space. So it's worth making sure that's clearly signposted, make sure people know where the home team and the away team are going to be based. Signs for toilets, making sure that, you know, if your risk assessment says only a certain amount of people can be in the toilet, then make sure that's clearly signposted. If the toilets are outside, I know some clubs have just outside accessible toilets, make sure they're very obvious. And if you have to go through the clubhouse to use the toilet, then again, make that very clear and make sure the rules on using the clubhouse are clear for people to understand. Signs for queuing and one-way systems. You know, if you've got bars operating later in the summer, or you've got queues for the toilets and stuff, make sure signage outlines that, basically. So one thing we'd say is just go big on signage, make things as clear as possible. And we've got a link in this slide. On our website, we've got a load of pre-made signs for your club to use. So if you click this link, you can go on there and download them all for your own use, so you don't have to make your own signs from scratch. So you use that link when the slides go out, that'll help you and save you some time, hopefully. That's it from me, Rich.
Thanks, Charlie. I'll just add a couple of points in just before I hand over to Tom. It's more around the communication as well around. So once you've done your risk assessment, you've got your signage up and you've thought about access points and drop-offs and how they walk around the ground, all those kind of things. The communication is really important. So ideally you want, when people are arriving at your ground, you want them to already be briefed on that and understand what policies and procedures you've got in place. So if there's one-way systems or certain car parking areas and things like that, try and communicate that with the opposition, but also with your local community if possible. So there were some good examples of that last year where clubs put things out on social media, through their websites, through regular communication with parents and players. So I think as much as possible, you know, try and brief people in advance of them arriving at your ground to ensure that smooth transition as they move in and around the ground. Okay, have we had any questions on that section?
I think I've just one around, you know, someone pointed out that the rules will change from May 17th. I'd just like to say, you know, we're obviously aware of that, the rules will change, but at the minute we're just giving that guidance for what is currently in place and what's going to be in place for the start of the season. So obviously all guidance will be updated as we go through the season and through the government roadmap, but obviously for now it's as it is.
Yeah, there will be further guidance or update to the guidance when we get to that. This is obviously step 1B and step 2 on the government roadmap or the ECB's roadmap, and the further guidance will come out as and when government have decided to move to the next phase. Spectators, I think, are we going to cover that in a minute? So on your slides, yeah. So we'll pick that up in a second. Okay, I'll hand over to you, Coxie.
Cheers, Rich. Hi, everyone. So we're just going to go through training and then hospitality and then a bit of summary. So So first of all, just around group numbers. So there's no set numbers of participants per group. You're not limited by the rule of 6, or we've seen some clubs been following kind of 30. Your club's risk assessment must outline what group size is possible and also number of groups are possible on your ground at any one time. But there is no definite rule in place. Please make sure you've got a maximum number of occupants outlined clearly based on social distancing on your ground. Just around the nets, so nets can be used as normal. You don't need to have a net kind of in the middle like you did last year. But again, you must risk assess how social distancing can be maintained in the nets and limit the number of participants accordingly. On the juniors, so clubs must ensure that junior supervision ratios and the coach or activator ratios are adhered to. So the below table on the slide has got those ratios in. What we'd say is limit interaction between groups at your venue. So example might be on junior training night, you might have the under 11s, 13s and 15s all training. Please make sure those groups are separate with their own coaches. So just a bit of an example. So if you're running a junior softball or an all-star session and you've got 24 children, all aged 8 or under, so the club are required to have one trained coach or activator, depending on what the program is, and they also need to have a further 2 adults present to meet the supervision ratios. And then also on that, if the group contains participants who are male and female, again, there must be a male and female supervising adult in attendance as well. Just on kind of all-stars and dynamos activator training, because we've had some questions in that about that. I'll provide a bit more detail in the next couple of weeks for that, and all the requirements of what those people need to go through was sent over in an email last Monday to the national programme contacts and also to club contacts. So that information's been sent over. Regarding DBSs, so currently, as I know a lot of you know, the club welfare officers can't initiate or sign off DBSs. Hopefully that will change in soon. We don't have a definite answer, but we'll be hosting a call next Tuesday at 7 o'clock, which we're happy to sign off DBSs for clubs on that call. So if you've got anyone who needs a DBS initiating, please send them over and we'll try and get that sorted before Tuesday. The information required is full name, date of birth, the role DBS is required for, whether that's a coach, captain, etc. And then we also need the person's email address. And then the last point on this slide is just around drop-offs and collection times. So these are times, as been mentioned, when there's potential for people to be congregated together and a lot of cars arriving at the same time or leaving at the same time. So please make sure, as Charlie said, around that signage, make sure that's all in place. If you need to use one-way systems, please do that as well. Please communicate in advance with people so they know what procedures you've got at your club. If you need to use kind of staggered drop-offs and collections, then again, please use that to limit the issues with a lot of people being, arriving at the same time or leaving might cause. Next slide, please, Richard. So hospitality, facilities. So question in the chat, yeah. So no spectators allowed until the 12th of April. From the 12th, according to government kind of roadmap, so spectators would be allowed in the group of 6. Again, this is subject to that roadmap progressing. Changing rooms, showers must remain closed for further notice, and we don't have any dates on when that might be, when that changes. All food and beverage areas at grounds must remain closed until 12th of April. Again, subject to progression of government roadmap, on the 12th of April, so for the outdoor food and beverage areas at grounds may reopen, and that's linked to the government guidance on hospitality. So for any premises that is selling alcohol, it is table service only for food and drink, even if no alcohol is ordered on that specific order. For venues or premises that don't sell alcohol at all, you're allowed to serve through a hatch, but then it must be consumed at a table. And then takeaway food and drink can still be sold, but this must be consumed off-site completely. For clubhouses and other indoor social areas, again, they must remain closed. Again, we don't have dates on when that might be. There are a few exceptions, as you can see on the slide. So toilets and hand washing. So as Charlie mentioned, signage is a really big thing here. So working out what your risk assessment says on things like occupancy limits, making sure you've got suitable ventilation, and then frequent and effective cleaning is also vital for that. And then you've also got first aid requirements, safeguarding, and if you need to do any COVID isolation, that's one reason why it can be open. And then the last point on the slide, so no cricket tees provided. And again, we don't have any dates when this might be changed. Next slide, please, Richard.
Sorry, Tom, just a couple of points. Well, there's a question in the chat, or there's a point in the chat from Jill just around alcohol being sold on premises. I think, Jill, on that, it just depends what the license is of the cricket club. So some licenses may allow takeaway or alcohol to be sold and then taken off site. I think, again, every club should just check what their license agreement is on that, because what you don't want to be doing is selling someone alcohol to take off site and your license not allowing you to do that. So I think you make a good point there, Jill. Make sure you're aware of what the license allows. And I think just stressing the point on how it's consumed. We all know that, cricket is a great one for someone buying a pint or a bottle of beer and having to walk around the boundary drinking it whilst they're watching the game. And in step 2, that's not allowed. So if alcohol or food is bought at the club, it needs to be consumed whilst seated at a relevant space on the ground. So we just need to make sure that's adhered to. Sorry, Tom, I'll move you on to the next one.
I'm just going to pick up on Dave's question around, it's put around 12th of April for DBSs, for club health officers. So yes, hopefully, what we definitely say on that is potentially on that date there'll be upwards of 4,000 people being able to get access to that system. People that maybe haven't had access for going on 12 months now. So we'd expect some difficulties with certain people being able to access the system. So I would definitely recommend that if you have got people that need DBSs sorting, get them sorted and don't just rely on welfare officers being able to access it again from the 12th. That's what I would say on that. So just a bit of a summary of what we've all been through, really. So just a few key points. So please make sure everyone's read the full guidance. As Charlie and Richard have already said, we've not gone through everything. We've just kind of gone through the top heavy stuff that we think is really important. So please make sure everything's read. Test and trace, again, really important. Make sure that's set up and signposted at your club of how people can sign in. Risk assessment, please make sure that's completed and put in place. And as Charlie mentioned, it's worth definitely having a copy handy at the club in case somebody comes in and checks. Make sure the ECB's checklist is completed because that will help you. And then thing around stocks of sanitizer wipes, and wipes, making sure that players and spectators have got enough. Woody, Cricket Force Day, have we got any information on what they're getting in that if they've signed up?
No, not yet. We know that the ECB are working on an agreement with a supplier where there'll be either a supply or access to a site where you can buy at a significantly discounted rate. But I don't think it's quite a signed and sealed deal, so that's why it's not been released yet. But I'm pretty sure it will be very soon. Yeah.
Again, signage, so making sure everything's right. All the signage is, we've got the links that you can access. One-way queuing systems for bars, toilets, pickups and drop-offs if needed. Again, making sure that's all clear in your risk assessment around occupancy of certain areas of your clubhouse or outside areas. And then with everything, if you are unsure, please get in touch with us and ask. We'd rather that happen than something go wrong because you've misunderstood something or things, and then something happens from the ECB or league, we don't want to happen, because we know it's a lot of information to take on board at the moment. Richard, do you want to move on to, is it questions next?
Yeah. So as we said at the start, yeah, we didn't intend to go through everything, because a lot of the guidance is similar to last year, and I think everyone's fairly comfortable with a lot of it, albeit some changes. So it's just an opportunity really. If anyone has any questions, you can use the raise your hand function on the chat, or at the relevant time just unmute. Ideally use the chat, that raise your hand, so we can bring everyone in at the right time, or post it in the chat. So if you've got any questions, we'll take them now. Jill, I can see you've got your hand up if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, thanks. I know you clarified the junior training and that they no longer needed bubbles of 6 with an adult supervisor. So that's pretty clear, other than we obviously need to stay in age groups. But the guys were asking me about senior training. So is that bubbles of 6 or just socially distanced?
There's no restriction on the numbers. It's what you have identified as appropriate and safe within your risk assessment. So if your ground's big enough so that you could have 3 groups of 10 around the ground, or 4 groups of 10, however many, and providing the activity can take place socially distanced, then that's how it's basically organised. So again, nets wise, I think last year it was 6 in a lane maximum. So there's no limit really on that, but I think it needs to be based on what is the appropriate number in that net and on the outfield.
And making sure obviously your grounds are used, the space you've got is used effectively, not all cramming into one area.
Exactly, yeah. And you might want to consider staggered start times and things like that, so not everyone's arriving at the same time and so on.
Yeah, thank you.
That help?
Yes.
Have we had any more in the chat?
Couple in, Rich, yeah. Matt's asked, how do we stand on members wanting to use the ground in their own time, so non-organised?
Yeah. So it's allowed, and obviously if it's unorganised activity, then it reverts to the bubble of 6, so the groups of 6 or 2 households. So it can take place, it can happen. What I would suggest, and it's not something you have to do, but I would potentially look at having a way in which someone wanting to use the nets has a way of booking it or notifying a club member that that's going to happen. So maybe having a designated person at the club that manages that, because what might happen, I guess, is that you might get a group of 6 going down for a hit, and then another group of 6 deciding to do the same thing on the same time, and suddenly you've got 12 people there. So I think it can happen. But it does revert back to the rule of 6 or 2 groups, 2 families. Does that answer that? Any others?
Yeah, a couple of others. Let me just have a look. If another club uses your ground, do they have to bring all their own equipment, i.e. scoreboards, stumps, etc.?
No, I guess it's down to the individual club. They don't have to, no. It would just be a case of making sure things are sanitised and cleaned down at the end of it. And it would be for you as a club to arrange that with the hiring club or hiring team that's using it. So no, they don't have to bring their own, but would suggest that there's a cleaning routine and process in place before and after that. So I just saw one from Sarah Bunting from Spondon just around table service. So can you please confirm, do we have to have table service only for food and drink from the 12th of April until the next step? So all we know at this stage is that from the 12th of April, yes, you have to have, if you're selling any food or drink at the club, it needs to be through table service and consumed at the table. Unsure at this stage of what that looks like from the 17th of May onwards. Any other questions?
Jill and Mick have got hands up.
Go on, Mick, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on Tom's point about the verifiers, club verifiers. I thought it was a good point made about lots of people coming on the system. I would advise verifiers to check that they can get on the system. For some people, if they will get locked out if it's a long time since they've been on the system. So I know we had a period when people could verify and initiate, but if for some people it's been over a year, it may be that they may not be able to get on the system straight away without it being reset. So just ask whoever your verifier is to just check that as soon as it becomes available.
Thanks, mate. Jill, have you got another question?
Yeah, so second question, just regarding the food and drink. So our ground force day traditionally is Easter weekend, which will be this Friday, and then we've got our club registration day on Saturday, which is just going to be a game at the minute, because obviously we're playing organised sport, aren't we? So are we not able to serve anything until the 12th of April and then only table service, or can we sell something now?
No, you can't sell anything. Well, you can sell, but only for takeaway and to be consumed off site until the 12th, and then after the 12th you can sell to be consumed on site. So no, at the moment you wouldn't be able to do it. So you wouldn't be able to put the barbecue on as an example and provide food up until.
I think it was more soft drinks I was thinking about. Just, if the guys are there for a couple of hours or something, they might want a soft drink. Or so anything before the 12th of April, anyone comes to the ground has got to supply their own refreshments.
That's right. Yeah. Any other questions from anyone? Have we had any more in the chat?
Not that I can see.
Anyone else? Feel free if you wanted to unmute. If it's easier to ask a question, then fire away. That's fine. No. Okay, I'll move us on then. But by all means, if there's any more questions, then if you want to, you can obviously email us or give us a call or anything. Then we'll try and pick them up. Just finally, in terms of as we said at the start, we've put a slide together which we'll send out, which has got all the useful links on. So all the links to the guidance, ECB guidance, the frequently asked questions, the infographics that go with it. There's some of the links to the signage, the risk assessment in Word document so you can edit it, and also the checklist. And then obviously some of it are things around the social media where we'll be posting updates and things. We'll obviously add the video link in from today's call into this slide, so you've got that. And if there's anything that you think of after tonight, then please do get in touch with us. As we said earlier, work your way through the guidance. The checklist is really useful. So if you work your way through the checklist, you should hopefully by the end of it have everything you need in place. We're always available, so all of us on the call and the rest of the team, if you need any support, then please get in contact with us, and we'd gladly help you with what we can. And then finally from me, just thank you again for joining us and for giving up your time to listen in. We're really hopeful that we're going to have a really positive season ahead of us, and hopefully with some weather like we've had over the last couple of days would be good, not the snow that's forecast next week. But let's fingers crossed. Let's all work together to ensure that we keep everyone safe and we do the job we did last year in keeping the game going. And I'm really confident that we'll have a successful season. So, as always, get in touch if you need us. But that's it from us. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Take care, everyone.